This is me. My name is 57 Batsibis, and I'm currently trespassing on someone's farm and beating up their livestock. Why do I do that? I'm not quite sure. It has something to do with this guy here, and much more maybe with me being absolutely new to this game and having no clue whatsoever. Beyond this farm, the question remains the same. How did I end up here? By that I mean, how the hell did I end up playing old school Runescape? Why do my new friends send me to beat up some friendly cows that did no wrong? And why the hell do I have such a weird name? For all of that to make even remotely any form of sense, we have to go back a bit. One fateful day I ended up on the old school RuneScape Steam page. For the longest time I've been searching for an additional game that I could play a bit more casual. My main games League and CSGO are, well, far from that. Not sure what exactly made me download the game. Maybe it's the superb graphics just captivating me instantly, the very positive ratings of the game, which you don't see too often on MMOs these days, or just the complete convincing reviews of fellow gamers which just make you want to play the game without further questions. But more likely is the fact that I actually never played the game in all these years, despite it being somewhat of an iconic game whose name precedes its reputation for sure, yet somehow always eluded me. Also, and maybe even more important, it is part of countless memes I've come across all the time but don't really understand the origins. I've seen and most likely even used the combat sounds and visuals in videos, but would never really understand where exactly they even came from. And if all of that wasn't enough, there's by far the biggest point though, which made this whole affair just way too easy for me. You know, after seeing that this is literally the best retro fantasy MMORPG on the planet. I mean, how could I not play the best retro fantasy MMORPG on the planet for so long, right? What am I doing? How dare I even call myself a gamer? So there was no other choice. I went and had to overcome the first big obstacle, a 10 megabyte download. Yes, that is the actual size of the game. And comparing that to certain other 90 gigabyte downloads that somehow disappear after 2 days of gameplay, mostly because they're shit, this game might actually have a really good megabyte to fun ratio. I'm pretty sure you heard about that metric a lot recently. Surely isn't something I just made up. Anyways, so whatever happens from here on forth, we've already won. So after carefully checking that I have enough available disk space and already making a bunch of plans for the time I'm downloading the game, we do press the install button. And with that, we officially enter the world of Gielinor. I hope it is pronounced that way. We start in this room, and as is tradition in these type of games, we have to give ourselves a name. I do my usual dance of trying out Flip just to be told that it is not available, and then I settle for the old reliable Flip was taken, just to also find out that it is not available, which is actually the first time this happened. Luckily, I'm offered alternatives by the game itself, and after careful evaluation, 57 Batsibis it is. Surprisingly also available. Color me shocked. I set the name, and exciting character creation it is. I click all the buttons, and after cautious assessment of the style choices I can make, this is what I end up with, and confirm. So, well, here I was, a little confused to be honest. Confusion lifted once I realized I was simply standing on top of the guy I was supposed to be talking to. So I do engage in conversation with the Gielinor guide. He teaches me all the basics, in this case, how to talk to people. I wish I had a Gielinor guide in real life. He then asks me very intrusive questions, which I have to answer with that it's my first time playing this game. Apparently I look this helpless that my first lesson contains how to click, as you will be doing that a lot. Good thing I have played League and CSGO before, because the one teaches me how to click a lot and the other one to click very precise, which in combination makes me the perfect RuneScape player, right? Anyways, I reach the survival expert. She gifts me a net and teaches me how to fish, which surprisingly contains a bunch of clicking, as all I have to do is click on the fishing spot. What then looks like me washing clothes is actually me catching my first ever shrimp. I was instantly hooked and couldn't stop but catch 2 more. I proudly report my success, which I was rewarded with being taught in the ancient art of making fire and cooking food. You might be surprised, but it actually requires you to click on a tree. The guy starts hammering away, supported by some excellent sound effects. Then I use the wood we just gathered with the tinderbox I got earlier. And there it is. Pretty sure that's what our ancestors must have felt. We click the raw shrimp, click on the fire, and as you can hear, we cook it. I do cook some more, and every time you do that, you get experience in that skill you're currently performing. Eventually hearing this sound, meaning you leveled up. I have to say, the sounds, they're quite something. I don't know what they are, but you can definitely hear them. Anyways, off we go to new lessons. First, I learned how to move the camera, which I guess. And right after the survival code teaching me how to cook, I end up in a kitchen with a cook who is now also teaching me how to cook. I inform him that I'm technically a master cook already, which he finds funny. I'm then being taught to use a bucket of water in combination with a bucket of flour, and through the power of clicking, create a bread dough. We then use the oven, and now we can eat a loaf of bread with freshly cooked shrimp. Not too shabby. Off we go yet again to the neighbor down the road, conveniently that being the quest guide. He's teaching me about quests in this game, and then tells me to go down a ladder in his living room, which gives me some horror movie vibes, but you know what, I might just do it. So here I am in this guy's basement, which looks a bit different than mine, to be honest. Oh well, to each their own. A bit further, I get my first very own pickaxe. I learn to use it for mining, then smelt what I just mined, then smith what I just smelted. We've been over this before, so in summary, you click on stuff. Something a bit more exciting though, a bit deeper into the basement. I introduce myself with what I guess is my name. That's how I got to know the combat instructor. Very friendly guy, as you can see. He tells me what I just crafted is absolute shit and gives me some better weapons. I guess I'll take that, literally. Then I have to prove myself in 1v1 combat with what I assume are giant rats, which leads to the question, who keeps those as pets in their basement? But oh well. Against all odds, I come out victorious and collect my loot, which is a bunch of bones, I guess. Needless to say, the guy was mighty impressed by my heroics he just witnessed, which then brings us to the art of ranged combat. I bring myself into position with my sideways slide move, and we're back fighting monster rats again, but this time with a bit of distance and safety, which makes them unable to fight back. Yet again, very heroic. After beating up yet another rat, I leave the basement, and we're off to new things to learn. Next up, I learn about the massive riches I have in my bank account. Also, in true democratic fashion, there is voting, which content should be added to the game next, but only for people with money that can buy membership of this game. Pretty realistic. Another very important piece of information I get from the account guide here. He's the one that breaks the bad news that there is a name changer, but it's also only allowed to people spending money on the game and being members. So 57 Batsibis it is. After that, just like every Sunday, I enter church, greeting the first guy in a hoodie with a sup bro. He's the one telling me that the bones that dropped earlier were actually pretty epic loot after all, as those are connected to the prayer skill, which is buffs you can use in game. After a divine peace bro, I leave the feller to move on to the last part of the tutorial island. I come across the Iron Man tutor. After innocently asking what the hell Iron Men are, my guy Paul over here starts telling me about Iron Men. Apparently there's a distinction whether you are hardcore or group. There's even hardcore group, and I get a very dodgy feeling here. I respectfully decline. Porn career was kind of a last resort for me, but I digress. I'd rather enter the house of an old man. Sounds much more fun. And turns out it actually is, because he teaches me how to blow up chickens through the power of magic. Well, almost. So, after surviving multiple cooking classes, being trapped in a guy's basement, and almost being recruited into some dodgy group of hardcore men, I did it. I'm being told once I actually am being teleported to the mainland to meet up with Adventurer John, which sounds very promising by the way, and just moments later, off we go. Here we are, Runescape, and wouldn't you know, Adventurer John already waiting for us. We do approach him, he welcomes us, and yet another time we have to admit we're completely new here. So he tells us about the adventure path, kind of a gateway into the game, and gives us a starter kit. There's two paths to choose from, combat and gatherer. I make the obvious choice, and the summary of this is essentially better your skills of certain combat variants, and eventually John rewards us. I'm then told to look for the men, chickens, or goblins near Lumbridge and start beating them up. So I look around, and what is that in the distance? Looks suspiciously like the aforementioned goblins. So I head on over, and we're going for combat again. I click on the goblin, and here we go. And just like in the basement earlier, absolute excitement of a combat action going on here, which for viewing pleasure, I'ma speed up a bit until I land the killing blow with a beautiful sound effect yet again. I get my very first kill. I'm not proud of what happens next, because when I try to click the bones, I just attack the next guy because he's standing on the same tile, which I guess is a mechanic I now know about. Matters not, we reign victorious yet again. I can finally claim my well-deserved loot of 2 times bones from random goblins I just beat up. I love this game so far. At this point, I also have to admit it actually took me those 2 kills to figure out that, well, there was that starting pack I got, which would have contained weapons. I equip a fancy sword and a beautiful shield, and wouldn't you know, it's actually a lot easier fighting goblins that way. Yet again, I am shocked. I keep finding myself surrounded by goblins, so, well, there is just no other choice than beating them up one after another. Keep collecting my epic loot, obviously, which makes me stack up on bones a lot. I find a piece of goblin armor, which I have to find out that sadly is too small for humans. I quickly flee the scene and keep beating up goblins, which brings me to the next mechanic I have to learn the hard way. See, I don't know if combat is actually random or if it's just a visualization of attack and defense stats being wagered against each other, but eventually, after a series of very unfortunate blue numbers on my end, there is death. And I mean literally, he's right there, sitting in his office. Because every time you die, I guess, can't tell for sure now, you spawn here again. And as this is my first time, death explaining me that my stuff is lost upon dying, but is still out there for recovery for a limited amount of time. As I'm a little bit under pressure here, I want to leave right away, but I have to do some sort of death tutorial first. So we're approaching death again, and listen to a bunch of stories on how I can apparently save items from death and give him a bunch of money and he does something with it. To be honest, I didn't quite listen. I was in a hurry here. I couldn't bother with more holdup. A little later though, we are back. I enter my standard state of confusion as I had no clue where the hell I was, but a little bit later I spotted the, at this point, pretty familiar bridge and hurried to gather my stuff. I do make it in time and gather all the bones and swords and things I've gotten already, so we can continue the journey. I'm losing no time and we're back to beating up goblins again. You might maybe recognize the fella in the black armor from the intro, and I have the suspicion that he was a silent observer of the past few minutes of my journey here, as the very next thing is him suggesting that your mans might want to fight the cows, as they're apparently more fitted for noobs like me. Given the fact that there's a lot of stuff running around and also some players, I'm assuming, I had to double check whether he was actually talking to me or not. He does confirm that it's me being the noob, so all that's left is where the hell are those? He offers to show me and I follow suit by following the guy in the black suit, I guess. Seconds later, we pass a warrior chef, also beating up a goblin, reoccurring theme here, and make it to some farmland, which I'm assuming the aforementioned cows should be. I show my appreciation for the help and I part ways with my newfound friend, which brings us back to clicking on opponents and watching the beautiful back and forth of the gameplay happen. One thing I have to say though, I tried multiple cows and I had a suspicion that this wasn't really any faster, as just one fight brings me down to 3 HP. I am not so sure about this one. Maybe the black suit guy just wanted the goblins for himself. I'm not sure. After then almost dying to yet another cow and barely living with 1 HP here, I thought to myself it might be time to actually play this game for once and use all the things I learned in the tutorial, no? Else might have been a waste of time. And given the fact that I had multiple cooking classes, I end up getting myself a nice steak. And better yet, eating it replenishes quite the health. So back to clicking on cows it is. And while I was sitting there watching that back and forth of the combat, which I don't know why, but it's oddly satisfying. Despite you're doing nothing, it makes no sense actually. I've come to wonder again, why the hell am I here beating up cows? They are not easier or faster at all. Also, there's a little bit of a moral dilemma, you know, goblins, cows. There's a difference. Also, it just took me 1 minute 30 to get that kill you just watched. All that for a bunch of bones, cowhide, and some meat. I still love this game actually. My next attempt was simply the idea that I chose the right size of cows, so after morally debating, I then went for the small ones, as I came to the conclusion that progressing random artificial points in a video game is definitely worth beating up helpless creatures in same video game. My bloodshed is only interrupted by clicking on yet another cow, expecting a fight to happen, and then I start milking it? Well, I have a bucket of milk now. After that accidental moment of peace, I obviously returned to beating up small cows again. And wouldn't you know, just a little while later, my efforts get rewarded. You know, just listen. That ever-deafening sound indicating I reached level 5 on the attack combat skill. And with that, finishing the first of Adventurer John's tasks. In anticipation of a reward, and hopefully him being very proud of me, I rush back to where it all started, claiming my reward, 1 steel longsword. Filled with excitement, instantly equipping it. Yet I wasn't too sure if that was actually an upgrade. Would be stupid if it wasn't, but well, you never know. So I hit examine on both the swords, which fills the chat with a bunch of letters and a bunch of numbers. And I'm back to my standard state of confusion, as I have not the slightest idea of what any of those could be. All I know is my new sword has higher numbers, that must be better, so I'm rolling with it. Then I started to explore a little bit. I found a place where you can sell things, which is conveniently adjacent to a line of fire, which I didn't really question too much. After all, it's me visiting a new place. Who am I to question their customs? I just got rid of all my junk to then learn that selling stuff doesn't necessarily yield in crazy gold gainage. But to be honest, yet another guess, because, well, how would I know? I step outside, ready for some new adventures, as I made room for those, you know, metaphorically. But it was at that moment that I saw a goblin viciously trying to rob a poor blacksmith. But not with me. Good things I was on the scene and made quick work of that evildoer. A fucking hero in the making. I buried the goblin's bones for religious purpose, but my need for adventure wasn't satisfied with that. Mindlessly killing creatures just because they look evil, and who knows, what if I'm the evil person? But that's too philosophical now, no, let's not go there. But oh well. I keep making my way down the road, littering the floor with goblin breadcrumbs, so I find my way back into the village, I guess. Obtain myself a new shield with mighty bigger numbers than the one before, which I'm still guessing is better. Bigger is usually better, someone once told me, and then she left. But hey, I could overcompensate with a big shield now, I guess. Edgy jokes aside, I'm further making my way down the path, getting rid of yet another goblin with the haha you can't reach me technique I learned earlier. Fell back into my old ways of beating up cows, but all of that seemed so little compared to what I was about to achieve. Finally an adventure that will make my past heroics look like the smallest tasks. It all starts with me beating up a chicken. Heroically, of course. But I couldn't help feeling a little observed. I assume those are this guy's chicken. So I approach him to clear up some things, but he does ask hard-hitting questions. I'd rather not tell him what I did on his land, but after a little bit of talking, we come to an agreement. And there it is, my very first quest. Can't wait what kind of heroics and adventures I will live through. Until I read the text a little bit more and realize he was simply looking for someone stupid enough to shear his sheep. And to make matters worse, I have to run to the city to make wool out of it. And to make matters even worse, he wants more than I have inventory space. Oh, so heroic. But oh well, gotta do what you gotta do. There's one silver lining though. While we talked, he said that there was the thing to be found somewhere on his farm. So maybe there's something there. We'll see. First, gotta pay my homage to the local customs yet again. Ah, now I get it. It's a firewall for the city. Clever. But first I gotta get rid of some stuff so I have a bit more inventory space. As I already mentioned, we will need quite the things. But yet again I heroically saved the townsfolk by beating up goblins, as is tradition here. Moments later, I'm off to shear some sheep. But I have to say I already feel the absence of the firewall. I'm really feeling unsafe. To make matters worse, whatever the fuck this is, it's the first thing I run into. My first thought was that this is just how good the graphics of this game are and this is supposed to be a sheep, but when trying to shear it, turns out this is two penguin with a sheep costume, I guess. The fuck? But oh well, I guess this is the thing that Farmer Fred talked about just earlier. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but God, I love this game. Be that as it may, I have a more important Herculean task ahead of me. So I get to work by making use of the good old clicking on stuff technique, which is still working like a charm. Until I click on yet another sheep, just to find out there's a difference between ram and sheep. So now I'm kinda accidentally fighting that guy. But you know me, brave as I am, I come out victorious. And whatever it is, the higher combat skill or the better gear, fighting stuff is definitely much faster and slightly more enjoyable now. After that slight detour, my daring quest keeps on going. But from here on forth, it's pretty much just click on the sheep to shear them, wait for my inventory to fill up, which makes me really appreciate inventories that are stacking the same item, by the way. And then off we go, as we have to go back to the city to make wool out of it. Also, I would have to lie saying that I found this place right away. But after a bit of running in circles and eventually consulting the map, I actually figured it out eventually. The gamer I am, you know. Spinning class it is. We convert the first half of the quest's worth of wool, and then we walk all the way back to Farmer Fred to find out if I can actually turn in the first half of what I already finished, which thank God I am able to. I also inform him that I've seen the thing he warned me about earlier, but after telling him that it is just 2 penguins in a disguise, my guy Fred just gives me 3 dots and then questions whether I've been out in the sun for too long. And that's where the conversation ends. But to be honest, how would you react if someone tells you that? Anyways, off we go yet again. Back to shearing sheep it is. We've been over this before. I get the remaining sheep done. Back to the city. Spinning class. Back to Fred. Handing in the last wool. And it's finally time to see what my heroics in this game are worth. I guess it's something. I get 1 quest point, which I guess I need eventually for taking higher level quests. 150 crafting XP, given the fact I haven't done any crafting so far. No clue how much that is. And 60 gold, which also, I don't know if that is a lot or not. I'll take it though. You gotta start somewhere, I guess. This might have not been the quest I was looking for and the heroics I was anticipating when starting my first quest. But then again, kinda made sense, no? To close everything off, I ended with how I started and beat up a chicken, and with that we're done. My first quest completed, and I'm heading back to the city, planning to spend the gold I just gained. I for sure deserve a treat now, no? And I remember that there was a certain pub right next to where it all started. That must be a sign. Obviously, we approached the bartender to start and get smashed in a video game. That sounds fun. While I was enjoying my beverage, I engaged in a little bit of conversation with the bartender, and he tells me about the Veos looking for a treasure. So naturally, I started a bar fight. I blame the alcohol, but obviously I end up being the winner, stealing this guy's money before reinvesting it. Given my already progressed intoxication, I started talking to said Veos. Eventually, he opens up about a scroll he obtains, which he believes leads him to something of great value. But he is currently hard stuck as he doesn't know the area too well. This is where I come in. I'm given that scroll, and one last advice from the guy is that I should maybe get a spade as he finds them relatively useful for treasure hunting. He wishes me good luck, and we're off to an actual adventure. Given I've recently come to absolute great riches, I can easily afford a spade at the general store. And after saving the employees once more, no biggie, we step outside and are off treasure hunting. Step 1, reading the scroll. Within the town of Lumbridge lives a man named Bob. He walks out of his door and takes 1 step east, 7 steps north, 5 steps west, and 1 step south. Once he arrives, he digs a hole and buries his treasure. Pretty easy if you ask me. I don't know why we're even doing this, like, come on. Well, so first thing, I have to find a guy named Bob, obviously. So I'm running through the town, hovering pretty much everything that moves in the hopes of it saying Bob there. And after a detour through the castle, without any Bob, I eventually end up in the last remaining corner of this whole thing. And wouldn't you know, there he is, in flesh and blood, or lines and colors, I don't know. The one and only Bob. They couldn't have chosen a better name, to be honest. The most generic thing. Lovely. Turns out he's but a humble axe seller. Anyways, let's get to work. A quick glance at the scroll, and I know exactly what to do. At least, so I thought, but here comes the first problem. Is stepping outside of the house the first step already, or do I now take an additional step east? The next thing I ran into, the character, if going for one tile at a time, takes 2 steps actually, but over a longer distance while running, he takes 1 step per tile. So are we now considering 1 step per tile, or the actual steps of the character in game? I might have very much definitely been overthinking this part, but here comes a little bit of a trial and error that happened afterwards. First attempt, I consider he steps outside the door, meaning he's already outside, and then takes another step east. I then follow the rest of the riddle and press the spade. Shockingly, I find nothing. I keep trialing and erroring with the spade a bit more around the place I was supposed to end up, potentially miscounting by 1 tile or something. Shockingly, I find nothing. So it's back to the roots. The root being Bob's door, obviously. This brings us to the next attempt, where obviously I'm starting inside of the house. But just as this door opened, I realized something. We have been starting from Bob's store and not from Bob's home. And the riddle clearly states Bob walking out of his door and not his store door. I might have very much definitely been overthinking this part, but unfortunately a woman was blocking the tile I was meant to walk on, so well, I had to remove her forcefully. Don't try that at home, kids. Anyways, off we go yet again, east, west, south and all of this. You know how this works by now. I then press the spade at various locations. Shockingly, I find nothing. That brings me back to the aforementioned state of confusion, as I've now spent quite the time on this task without getting anywhere. I'm trying a last few Hail Mary trial and error attempts, but none of them end up any place useful, as I'm currently in a castle stairwell. I even asked good old Bob for some help, but he wasn't too eager to get involved, I feel like. Then I searched his home for some clues, couldn't find anything, and I even went all the way back to Vias, but his only piece of advice was to maybe find someone called Bob. Very helpful. Thank you. I let a rat fill my frustration, which didn't really solve the riddle either. And I was back, giving it yet another shot. This time I simply took 1 tile at a time, which leads me into an area where I have been before. But turns out if you do it like this, you actually end up on a tile that I haven't been before. To be honest, no idea how I fucked that up earlier, as I was literally 1 tile away from the right one, as this is where we find the treasure. Let's just ignore that half my game time of this game is me figuring out this one quest, but I have to say I enjoyed it, and I'm glad to inform you the hardest part of this is over, but 1 step at a time. Bunny, we yet again read the scroll. This time an actual treasure hunt with a map. As I've been in the castle before, I easily recognize this shape, so I follow the map all the way around the castle, where we bring out the spade again. And wouldn't you know, just 2 more attempts later, I found success a bit faster this time, let's say. We find a mysterious orb that radiates heat. So we simply walk somewhere else and try it again. The orb is still cold, but colder than last time. We're making negative progress. Let's go. Pretty much lines up with how I did things so far. So off we go again, but I do obviously not pass up on an opportunity of beating up a goblin. And also turns out, yet another task completed. And wouldn't you know, right next to Adventurer John? Crazy how things play out sometimes. I'm getting myself some more gear from him, and further off we go. We have some treasure to hunt. A bit further down the road, the orb is telling me still cold, but warmer than last time. Good news for once. So this kind of shenanigans keep on going. We walk a bit, we click the orb, it tells me we're getting closer. We pass the cows, we pass the chickens, and eventually we come to a farm that I haven't even seen before. This one is littered with goblins. Boy, do I love that. And then eventually we hit this crossroad, this very faithful one, because here for the first time the orb is telling me that it is the same temperature as last time. I can already feel the treasure. It must be right here somewhere. Or any thought process kind of like this one could explain why I then spent the next few minutes running in circles, pressing the orb and pressing the spade, alternating between the two, and shockingly, I find nothing. Until I eventually make it a bit further down this off-road here, and I have seemed to finally figure out that the same message doesn't necessarily mean that I am where I'm supposed to be. It just means that I'm not making any progress towards it. Surprising, I know. So on we go, following further down a little bit of a lingering path into yet another off-road on towards the other side. Guess I'm still drunk from those beers earlier. Makes sense actually. Which brings us to this place where suddenly the orb is incredibly hot and obviously warmer than the last time. I keep running up and down a bit more and no idea how I did that, but the very first tile I picked, I dig up a treasure scroll. And yet again, we click it and are greeted with this message. The cipher reveals where to dig next. And a bunch of gibberish. I know I said it before, but this might be actually the biggest case of state of confusion that I found myself in playing this game. I was spending quite some time debating, considering whatever this here means, without any success, obviously. I tried reading it backwards and forwards and sidewards and all the words. I even typed it out, expecting that, you know, maybe something comes out of it. It didn't. And after a few more minutes of just standing around or running in circles, actually kind of just expecting something to happen, there was but only one way. I ran all the way back to VS because I need some form of help. I was stuck. I had no fucking clue what to do. Anyways, back in town, let's see what the good guy has to tell us. I admit that I need some help. I show him the scroll and there's actually some good advice. He says, try shifting the letters one to the left or the right. That normally works. Well, good thing I wrote it out in the chat, so it's right here already. But here comes maybe the most impressive part of all of this whole whatever this is. I guess there would have been other and maybe better and more effective ways to do this, but picture this. I picked up a physical piece of paper and a physical pen in front of me in real life, you know, put it on my desk and wrote down the cipher, just so I then can do the version of one letter to the right and one letter to the left. I started with one to the left, and from Edzbzopskukov whatever came a Draenor Pigpen. And wouldn't you know, quick glance at the map reveals this thing actually exists. At least Draenor exists right here. And I'm assuming there's a pig pen. So, back to where we came from. And, well, pretty much let's look for some pigs, shall we? First step is this house that is right next to where we just were pretty much spending the last 20 minutes. Looked promising, but sadly no. Had something more or less good in the end though, because this is where I learned that there are also aggro monsters or enemies in this world. This guy here did not agree with me trespassing. And wouldn't you know, this one is actually a little bit stronger than I am. I do try to run, misclick a bunch of times, and barely save myself with some state, replenishing just enough health. Making it out barely, I end up in what I guess is Draenor. I am wandering the streets, looking around. I don't really see anything initially, so pretty much just walking, looking, basic stuff. But what is that at the edge of my screen? Looks quite like pigs to me. I do open the door and, well, I mean, there's just a bunch of tiles, so I just picked the very next best, hit the spade, and god gamer I am, I dig up an ancient casket with a faint whispering feature. I tell myself this was definitely the win, then I keep talking to myself, which, you know, well, we have to go to the northernmost pier and port something. A quick flick at the wrist with the camera reveals a bunch of ships nearby. Wouldn't you know, kind of like the theme of this whole quest, you know, one place next to another. I see a hole in the ground, and there I learned that, well, shortcuts only if you have money and spend it on the game at the same time. I don't have either, so we walk the long path around. And as I approach the pier, I already do see our friend waiting right at his ship, I assume. So I click on him, as per usual, and bring him the good news, being the treasure chest, I guess. I'm getting a warm thank you, and after asking what's the treasure, Vio's coming on with the deflective strategies. So yeah, but apparently we don't care. What we do care for though is a reward. And there it is. Quest number 2 complete, and quite a quest it was actually. We're getting yet another quest point, an antique lamp, 200 coins, and a beginner clue scroll. Not too sure what to make out of all this, you know, state of confusion, blah blah blah, you know the drill. Vios has some last words for me though, so he's getting back to Great Kurend, whatever that is, but he invites me there, so that's something I guess. I appreciate the offer, and that is that. And this is also where my initial Runescape adventure comes to an end. No clue if it will continue. If it will, we might definitely look into that epic loot we just got, but you know, one step after another. For now, it's a wave goodbye to Vios and a wave goodbye to you guys.